Hello, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be kicking off with a new series of Vina Talks ND Life. And I call it new series a little bit arbitrarily in the sense of perhaps we can call it new series because it's the new academic year new series. Calendar obviously wouldn't feature yet. So new series, new episode. It's been a little longer than what initially intended for us to be able to give you a new, fresh episode of Vina Talks ND Life. But I think you're in for a treat. I am absolutely delighted to invite Nisar. Nisar and I met only a month or so ago, but I think it was, and it's not going to sound surprising to most of you, it was an organic meeting of minds and souls. And through what? Through our mutual neurodivergence experience in life. So without further ado, Nisar, welcome to Vina Talks ND Life, a series exclusively done for GAIN, the group for autism, insurance, investment, and neurodiversity. We're beyond delighted to have you. And can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, how do I introduce myself? Interesting.
Any way
So
you want, really.
I'm 46 years old. I am currently sitting in Huddersfield, looking at the grey skies and having this wonderful conversation with you. So basically, my journey so essentially is that I am a late diagnosed adult. I'm autistic. I also have inattentive ADHD with some impulsivity and some hyperactivity. I was diagnosed earlier this year, and essentially I am kind of essentially, I think, reborn in a way. I'm seeing life through the lens of a neurodivergent person, all the challenges that come with that, all the good and the bad. And really just wanting to sort of share my story because I think it is a unique one. I've been in the insurance industry over 20 years. Started off within the personal lines sector, and then I moved into commercial in 2013. Yeah, I have had one heck of a journey from my diagnosis, or shall we say, my realization that I'm actually neurodivergent, to my diagnosis, to looking for work, and as we have discussed, finding work. So yeah, hi.
Excellent. I mean, honestly, in a society that many people basically have got certain hang-ups about age and quoting ages or defining what's old, what's older, what's young. I salute you for just being open because age is just a number, right? And age in it, if we really want to speak of it as a number, even carries a lot of rich experiences. However, I hear you and I hear you loud and clear when you say, I feel reborn. I would love for you to unpack that element of feeling reborn before we delve deeper into the insurance, and also kind of just congratulate you on that sort of finding job item, which is a delight to hear, more of which no doubt will feature later on. But what about
Thank
that
you.
reborn feeling?
So I think it's more a case of, and I think when we've discussed this before, Vina, it's that moment of when everything clicks. You understand exactly why your mind works the way it does, how you cognitively process. Suddenly, I mean, it's a very cliche thing to say, and I've heard a lot of neurodivergent people refer to it as though it's like the Matrix. Everything suddenly becomes, you know, you're able to see everything. Um, so I have to be honest, I've been going through 40 plus years of my life with a certain understanding of myself, and then with my, I guess my, realization that I'm actually neurodivergent, and then that confirmation, being validated, it's given me a whole new perspective on everything. The way that I interact with people, the way that I process, the way that I manage my own mental health, the way that I manage, my energy levels, the way that I manage sensory challenges, the whole shebang essentially. And it's like looking at life in a completely different lens. Um, One thing I will say, that I find more and more is I always thought this was my personality, but I would say that I am autistic. That is my personality, and a lot of my personality comes from me being autistic. A lot of my quirks, a lot of the good things and the bad things, they're all down to my neurodivergent makeup. Um, so yeah, and I like to talk. I love to talk.
We love to talk, all of
We
us
do.
here. I think that one of the greatest reasons why we're doing this podcast is because we do like to talk, and there's something quite cathartic
Yeah,
in sharing openly. And sometimes, much as most of us neurodivergent people, without wanting to generalize, I also endorse hugely and very respectfully what we say. You've met one neurodivergent person, you have met one neurodivergent person.
absolutely.
We are all unique, through this wiring, through this cognition and the experiences, as well as cultures, backgrounds, anything, the whole sort of package. But having said that, we're people who don't necessarily enjoy the limelight, but we become somewhat heroic and sharing when it comes to seeing others through our own eyes and matching those experiences. And that's exactly what led us to organically connect so genuinely, because when you were speaking about your own journey through the diagnosis, through that realization of suddenly everything clicks, I could see quite a lot of me in it. Now, when you said you're putting things into new perspective, has that made you more unhinged? Has that made you more, so ultimately this is who I am and I'm going to stand by it no matter what? What has been the element of that sort of diagnosis, that sort of solidifying the fact that
I think for me, I've always liked to champion causes, whether it's things I believe in or whether it's an interest I have or such. And for me, my journey, my experiences as a South Asian British-born individual, male, going through this whole process, I want to be a voice for others that look like me. I want people to see and say, okay, so autism and ADHD can look quite different because I don't look like your typical autistic person. If that's, and this goes back to what you're saying, you've met one, autistic person or one neurodivergent person, you've met one. Um, and that's the thing. So for me, I think the big thing is I really just want to advocate and really want to strengthen the position for those who perhaps can't, and be a voice. I have the fortunate privilege of being able to communicate. This time last year, I didn't. I think we talked about, my autistic regression, which was a big turning point as well. But now I've got my voice back, and I want to use that.
mm, it is quite liberating, isn't it? Communication doesn't come easy.
No.
Communication, many neurodivergent people will tell you that brings them to exhaustion, gets them to need to replenish this energy tank, and sometimes that time varies. It varies depending on whether we're speaking into communicating through a very formalized setting, like for instance that one of an interview, or even going to a social event. So they all have, if you will, a different price tag, whereas rather than price, we're speaking energy consumption tag, right? And that's difficult to communicate even within your immediate circle, that one of the immediate family, that it does take quite a lot of resource, that communication. And often enough, you're addressed as, but you're an extrovert. How come that's the case? People don't always understand that. No, trust me. What you see here might not even be masking per se, although some people would say, yes, we mask. Some others would say, well, I don't mask, but that doesn't mean it doesn't take the resource of energy away from me. Communication is key. I mean, could you to take that communication in the perspective of your recent experiences with job hunting and interviews, and whatever you feel like safe in sharing of your experiences, we would love to hear.
Interesting you mentioned about energy because it's something that I've become so mindful of. So just, put some perspective into it. Today's our shopping day, our food shopping day. I hate going shopping. Going to the supermarkets is extremely draining. It can knock me out for a few days. Just the overwhelm of the noise, the lights, the smells, the disorder. God forbid it when Tesco decide to re-merchandise the shelves. You know, you've taken the order that I need as an autistic person and you've thrown it out of the window, and I now need to recalibrate. Um, so that's putting a light spin on it, but it is quite heavy. But as far as with my job searching journey, communication has been really important. And being frank and being quite honest, it's been extremely draining as well because I
Mm.
have had to mask. I have had to mask. I've got myself to this point now where I'm a lot more confident than I was say at the start of the year, before the start of the year. But when I was having conversations with whether it be recruitment agents, it'd be as insurers, it'd be talent acquisition teams as such, or even just with other sort of ancillary support services as well, my stammer would come out, which is something I've been working on. And I would find that constantly having to be on all the time and constantly having to have this mask on would just drain me to the point of where basically I couldn't then do anything else I wanted to do. I wouldn't be able to, say, for example, fulfill a task that I had set out to do. I wouldn't be able to, cognitively process what I needed to prioritize. I just would be very tired. So energy resourcing and energy management is a real
Yeah.
important thing.
And I
Yeah.
mean, everything you say resonates. Energy resourcing, energy management, and that fabulous word of psychology and the double empathy. And you consciously masking, knowing that you are, even if not externally, but internally sweating to get your message across, then almost desperately trying to read the room, to look around for this supportive pair of eyes or a gesture that would be translated as, you are seen, you're okay, you're safe. And often enough, when you haven't regained your confidence for yourself, that cannot be seen, right? Isn't it? It's just that you can see more of these signs, the more confident you get about yourself. When you are during this susceptible, this sort of sensitive periods of your time in your life, it's very difficult to find this empathy. I don't know whether some incredible chemical reaction happens there, and the others also feel like not assertive enough to give you this, it's okay. How did that double empathy, how did that psychology, how did that sort of receptiveness from your environment hit you at this sort of point?
It's interesting to say that because so right now we have a good rapport. We've spoken before. We resonated very, very deeply. I feel like this is a safe space to talk. You put me in front of somebody else who perhaps I haven't had I've got nothing in common with. They don't understand my struggles. I'm going to come across very differently. I'm not going to, I may seem like I'm quite extrovert, I'm quite outgoing. I'm not. From a Myers-Briggs perspective, I'm an ISTJ, I'm a logistician, so I'm actually an introvert. The reason why I can shine a bit more here now is because you get me. It takes one to know one, and that's the whole double empathy thing. So, as an example, I attend a local support group here in Huddersfield, the HSGA. So, shout out to all of those members. And I found community with those people. Amazing people, all of them. They've all got different stories to share, and we empathize because we're very cathartic, but we get each other or we understand each other. It's a safe space, and I can I can understand them, they can understand me, and I communicate a lot more fluidly. Likewise, as soon as I know that somebody does really understand the neurodivergent identity and the struggles that come with that, suddenly I can feel like, okay, I can not have to over process this whole situation. Whereas if it's someone who perhaps isn't, or inverted commas is neurotypical, then I'm trying to read the room. then I'm trying to read the body language, and then I'm trying to read every single gesture, every single intonation, every single cadence of the way someone's speaking. And it's just like, okay, your brain is now going to flatline because of the energy.
Yeah. And I hear you and I see and I can see myself and so many people that have been through that community that you say, it's a beautiful word, community, especially when it's carried out genuinely
Yeah,
from the depths of one's own needs. Because, I can see out there's loads of people who understand the value and the power of community, but because it hasn't been sensed deeply from their own needs, the community does not come across authentic, does not come across genuine. And really, here, if it's through this podcast series that I get the opportunity to pass on a message, which is, yes, please, we need more communities, and great and so beautiful of you to give shout outs, because people who do create communities, and it comes from the place of really their own needs and their own experiences, please continue, because even if you influence the life of one person, that multiplier effect, because we are all citizens of our society, right? That multiplier effect that can have will really touch the lives of so many more. It is not just one person. And that just one person is still glorious enough, because it's a lot to feel inspired and feel mobilized and encouraged again to pursue your own purpose, to pursue your own sort of potential. But it takes me also to the point of interviews, right? Interviews, especially in the financial professional services, which we love, but we love it so much that we always highlight things not
yeah,
particularly good. They always play that game of the good cup, bad cup, right?
yeah,
And that we need to say does not work,
yeah,
because if what we're looking for is unlocking the true potential and the goodness of people by intimidating or making somebody like us apprehensive, or like anybody who's gone through something in their life, right, that doesn't allow them to be what's expected, you cut down some potentially hugely productive and beneficial for the organization people. There's not a question, it's just a statement from me, and I'm sure you have some views on that. So floor is yours.
yeah. So with my current situation, I've had, as I guess what you call it, sort of 2.5 interviews. One wasn't a full interview as such, but the thing is it's great having structure. It's great having a structure of what you are thinking and is going to happen in that interview. But I completely agree with your point that, you know, there needs to be a change in the way that interviews are carried out, because what are you trying to get to? You're trying to understand, is this person going to be good for the role? Is this person going to be a good fit for the culture? Are they going to be a good fit for the team? You're not going to get that when you keep asking the person the same old questions. What you need to do is have a real fluid conversation. Have a look at that person's CV, invest in that CV and say, okay, talk through your work, talk through the bits that you enjoyed, talk through the bits you didn't enjoy. What was it? What would lighten the mood? Take away some of the formality away from an interview and make that conversation collaborative and fluid. Then you will find the actual traits you're looking for. Because when you actually disarm, both parties, you're going to find, okay, whether you actually fit or not. Just as an example, so I went to the HSGA support meeting this last Tuesday, and some of the members that I was sitting with, one particular member, we were talking about job searching. I told them, obviously, I've got this position now, and we were discussing. And the thing that I have struggled with, and it's something that I'm seeing a lot in the neurodivergent community, is there is so much untapped potential. And it comes down to one thing and one thing only. You're not asking the right questions. You're asking questions, you're just not asking the right ones. So if you're going to ask me about, like for example, telling you about the history of your company, that's all great. But have you asked about understanding a little bit about what makes me tick and what doesn't? To understand what resonates with me and what doesn't? To understand how my cognitive processing mind works? As an autistic person and as a neurodivergent person, we have an innate ability to problem solve. Imagine you've gone through your entire life, or you're going through your life constantly being introspective, trying to figure out why doesn't X equal Y? And why is that happening? So you're constantly problem solving. These are traits that people would just, die for. Do you know what I mean? And they're available in so many neurodivergent people. And in the meeting that we had, the support meeting, there was one particular gentleman, and I was shocked. He's got a PhD, I think, in math. He's got high qualifications in mathematics, and yet he's doing a low-level job. And one common thread that kind of goes through a lot of the neurodivergent experiences that I come across, people I speak to, and my own, we downplay our own abilities just to make sure that we can actually sort of still exist in that space. But yeah, going back to your point, it really comes down to redefining how you do those interviews. I've come across, people doing like competency-based interviews, but I've also come across this notion of situation judgment interviews, which I think is a really good idea. But I do think you do need to have a more fluid conversation. In my search for work, I work with a job coach who is also autistic, and she said to me quite openly, she's like, "What's the difference between you trying to find work now compared to when you were trying to find work, say, before?" And I said, before, they were looking for the personality, they were looking for the person. Now, they don't seem to. They want to find someone that's going to meet all the checklist. So go on, hire a robot, but you won't find a person in there. And that's just me being very frank about it.
As a person who's fascinated and very active in my research, in my writing, in the way that I teach, given that nowadays I've also returned in the educational sort of setting. And I see that as an attempt to give back and pay forward, because at the end of the day, even education, we're speaking a lot about finance, but there's a constant sort of funnel. It's a give and take, right? It's a two-way stream between education and the educational system. Because speaking of untapped potential, quite a lot of the existing graduate positions are being sourced directly from that educational system, which meanwhile doesn't have the best of reputation because it's seen in an exploitative sort of light, or in a light of a transaction, that if I go to an Oxbridge sort of uni, then I can fast track myself into, say, the financial sort of industry, right? But I'm seeing quite a lot of difficulty for our industry. And again, as I said, as an active researcher in that intersection between business, the future of work, and technology, I find that we're becoming quite, I don't want to use harsh words like enslaved, but
Lazy?
really very much controlled even.
Yeah.
Yeah, controlled by this eternal digital transformation and AI. What does that mean? To the point that rather than us trying to empower humans to be enabled by the usage of the right types of technology that meet their own as well as the organizational objectives, we want to turn humans into what you beautifully said. And I mean, somewhat, I would add, from my perspective, sarcastically, and we need to be a little bit facetious about it, into robots. And that's not the way, is it? That fluidity,
No.
the bringing back the basics, the values of communication, that fluidity. To be honest, I freeze when somebody treats me as a testing sort of object. I'll test her now, and I'll ask her a series of questions. Are you ready? Question number 1. And I feel like, oh my God, is there a time frame or something? No, just allow me to unfold, unveil who I am. And I hear you, that fluid and communicative conversation was beautiful. Rather than making it a monologue, it's not the intention. And if any of us should have a monologue, it would be you, really, of so much benefit. Can I go back into a question? So what has been different with this position, with this interview, that really resulted in you accepting the position and, of course, being welcomed into the organization compared to other experiences that you've had? So what has been that winning sort of point for you?
So for this one, they did things very differently. I'm being very quite transparent here. I over prepared for this interview. I over prepared for this position. Perhaps I didn't need to, but I did. But they provided guidelines. They provided good, clear guidelines. The person that did the interview was disarming, very experienced, and it was like a conversation. They were very open to me using memory aids, so I was able to read off pieces of paper that I'd written, like examples I'd written. They were open to me basically being able to, use what I needed to be able to get the best out of me for that particular interview. They were patient. They let me go for my tangents. And this is the thing, they were inclusive. That's the big thing. They were inclusive. I have to say, I'd say in this particular interview and the interview I had just before that as well, both companies were very inclusive. They did things very differently. The previous company in particular, their sort of the way that they had approached my challenges was very interesting, and it's something I appreciated. I think a conversation that needs to happen with a lot of people when you've got an applicant and they tell you that they have a disability or that they have a challenge or such, the question should always be, and this was a question that was put to me from this particular previous company, was how can we help you do the best that you can do in this interview situation? What can we do to remove the boundaries and the barriers? And they worked as much as they could possibly do for me. I've got to take some responsibility for myself. I'm not the best in interview situations. I don't do very well in those sort of positions. But when it's something like this, where it's a free-flowing conversation, crack a joke, have some banter, then you see it. And maybe that is what you need to get back to. You talked about this reliance on technology as such, and I definitely saw that. When I first started applying for jobs, my original CV I thought was amazing. I thought it was really good. But one thing I didn't have on my CV were the gaps in my career. I didn't understand, and I was being rejected pretty much immediately from position. I thought I could do this like the back of my hand. Why am I being rejected? And the thing that I think I misunderstood or maybe didn't appreciate was in the time that I had last been in work and then come back into the job market, things had changed and changed in a way where there's so much automation of applications that there's there's, for example, the ATS, the applicant tracking system, there's AI solutions, there's software that weeds out keywords, there's software that basically looks at you having more than 75% of a match of a job's description before it goes to a human. I didn't know that I was up against all of that. I had to rethink my CV, and I'll give credit to, people from my past, from my previous job, who I was able to reach out to on LinkedIn, who gave me some amazing advice about how to frame my CV and how to reframe my gaps in my career as well and be honest. But even then, that was still a challenge. And I was always coming up against this, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Something that I come across a lot on LinkedIn with the posts that I see are people saying normalize giving feedback after a rejection. That's a huge thing. How are you ever going to get better if you don't know what you're doing wrong? And that was the thing for me with my neurodivergent journey. I struggled actively over 15 years not knowing that I had ADHD. I had memory issues, and I would go back and forward to doctors, getting medically invalidated and getting worse and worse and worse. A person is not going to get better if they don't know why they're getting worse. And the same goes for a job. when you are getting rejected, tell them honestly, why are you getting what is it about them you didn't like? Be honest. You say, you want to be honest, you want to be transparent, you value transparency. Well, do that the same way. If you have got some form of parameter that basically decides that X person does not meet our requirement, well, I'll tell you what, tell them why that is. Because honesty, and maybe this is just me from my as an autistic person, I have a very strong ethical, moral code, and I have that strong autistic sense of justice, which is like, I don't understand in my head why you can't be honest, because, and this is just talking cognitively process wise, it takes more cognitive processing to tell a lie, to go around the houses, to try to come up with a reason to sort of butter someone up and cushion them than it does to just be honest. Because honest, you're being transparent. Do you see what I mean? That's my feeling anyway.
Entirely. I see what you mean. And as you were speaking initially, I was taking notes, and I was speaking exactly of that, my own notes. I always take notes when I'm on an episode. I am so actively listening that I also focus on, wow, the gems of the people sharing with me and trusting us here in this recording space with these incredible pieces of advice, but also, and it's ultimately it is advice, but it's not felt like advice for the person who interacts on this podcast sort of environment. It is more about you sharing your lived experience, but through that, this, oh my God, so much. So I had written down exactly that. We cannot give you feedback. Due to the sheer amount of applicants, we cannot give you feedback, which goes against the grain of what you were saying, because you said they were treating me really like a human, like an individual. Well, if we promise you in our glossy brochures that, yeah, we care about human potential, this and the other, but then once you're on the exit sort of arm of whatever interview processing, application processing software one is using. So, you don't, you're not needed, basically. You don't feature, you don't fit, you don't, whatever. Sorry, due to the sheer amount of applicants, we cannot give you feedback. Yeah. Well, how on earth can I lift myself up again? And, people take it lightly and take it from a point of comfort. Yes, you're already recruited, you're already in that organization, you're experienced, you're a hiring manager. Well done to you. And nothing disrespectful about, no doubt, a lot of effort that you put in and commitments that you upheld to be where you are. However, put yourself in the shoes of the applicant. And there's people who, not just being neurodiverse, there's people who are going through tough patches in their lives. That's life for you, yeah. Everybody who's lived long enough or somewhat long enough in their adult life would have appreciated by now that life is like a cardiogram. Okay, has got its trophy, has got its peaks. And yes, often enough when we're thinking how much lower can it go, it's a little bit reassuring to know that things will actually start looking up again. But things happen. And so you cannot be expected to perform in a very solid, consistent, and successful way in every single interview. The best way is to be treated as an individual. And that is ultimately what I heard from you. I was treated like an individual. And how refreshing, as a person who actually does go off tangents. There's always a connection in my brain, but I cannot really advocate for whether the other person sees this connection. And you're absolutely fine not to see this connection. But in my head, it all makes sense. How great is it for the other person to feel like we hear you? We also actively try to follow that stream. And like recording a podcast, I don't create any questions. We've spoken, we've introduced each other, to one another, but that's about it. Then it's all organic. And what you tell me, what I tell you is just on the point. But I think that's that point of, we are here because we both serve a purpose. And that purpose is a mutual one. We want to celebrate difference. And we want to say to people, we all go through life in our own way, with our own different cognitions, with our own socioeconomic backgrounds, educational levels, cultures, religions, you name it. All of that, beyond even the protected characteristics, right? Question is, how can we improve individually, and how can we collectively create a better society?
I think really it really comes down to the openness and the willingness to want to learn and to hear. People talk about listening empathetically, and the strength in good listening skills as such, but sometimes people aren't. Understanding people's differences, understanding people's challenges, and really appreciating that as well. I'm really fortunate that I've been able to, not only from my own experiences, but see like the challenges. Like one thing, for example, that struck me really, was quite difficult to kind of almost comprehend was with the support group meetings I go to. There's always this constant thread of how difficult it is for children at the moment within the education system, like SEND kids, as they call them. And one thing I was talking to a parent was that I would have thought that by now the education establishments as such would have caught on and would be giving these kids a much more support than perhaps you would find in maybe the work environment, because with the work environment there's still some time for them to evolve into that mindset. But if you're not getting it there at an early stage, are we not surprised that we're not going to get it here at the later stage as well? I don't know if I'm answering your question, Vina. Again, I'm going off on tangents.
No, I mean, in the sense of it wasn't a question, and you're definitely not going off tangent. You're actually reaffirming the point. Send kids in the educational system is just a byproduct, the treatment of. It's a byproduct of that. It's a matter of numbers.
Yeah.
I think we're turning into a very utilitarian society. That universal design is what we're advocating for actively, that social model rather than the medical model. A lot of trust and respect for medicine and the great advancements therein, but humans' psyche, humans' cognition is a matter of social acceptance and cushioning. It's not, as you said beautifully, it's not about buttering each other up. It's about being honest, transparent, and whilst doing that, exercise your inner empathy levels and not treat everything as that mass production. That yes, we adhere and we promote and we are employees within a capitalist sort of socioeconomic system. Okay, so we all know the rules of that game, but I think we can afford, by doing exactly what we were saying earlier, by making the most of that technological optimization and efficiencies to cut down that almost blinded addiction to the bigger number, the better it is, into allowing for individual understanding, because that individual understanding will have ripple effects on the way that we operate as a society. And once we get there, you will see that magic happening in the educational system, in the family, and interpersonal connections between people. You will see the ripple effect also in the workplace. You will see. I very much believe in collective intelligence. I very much believe in empowering the individual, because it all starts from the individual, especially in days and times like that people looking at the political sort of setup and they're completely disappointed, if not, depressed by what we see. I think the strength lies within us and within some genuine connections and understanding between each other. And that liberation that comes from, wow, there's a person who does this, and I'm this person of this quirk, and this person of this background. How much more open does it suddenly turn, right? Rather than everybody feeling the necessity to homogenize themselves, as you were saying earlier, as I've seen, to be accepted or to be playing ball with. No, play ball with me, even if I'm not the best of players now, because that might actually make me want to play more, want to practice more, want to prepare more. I had studied last year's, or academic terms, I don't know, it depends on how I played each time, with a promise to our audience that in addition to us speaking about lived experiences, and that will be the last thing that I ask of you, because I'm conscious of the fact that I've had your precious time for quite a while now. So I would like to allow you to continue enjoying the rest of your day. But I promised them some practical tips. And you hit us with something that keeps on happening over and over again. And I hear a lot of my dear friends and community members, that gap in the CV, that horrendous gap on the CV. And you're not alone, Nisar. There's always this kind of, what? You have a gap in your CV? Take even a mother who took 2-3 years, God forbid, to see through the first 3 years of the baby and stay at home. You have to find something. You have to. So do you have, and as many as you have, one, have, none, it's down to you. Any practical tips as to how should one treat that sort of gap in the CV?
Be honest. Be honest. I mean, so for example, one tip that I was given by a dear friend, and it really helped me, was be honest about that gap in the CV, and then think about how you can reframe that gap into a positive. So, for example, those that know me know that I have been through bereavement, and reframe that bereavement in a way of how I was able to be resilient, how I was able to tap into, my ability to problem solve, how I was able to, for example, put into place, contingencies and have an awareness of my own, emotions and how I would deal with something, the practicalities that come with that. So what I would say is when it comes to things like gaps, I would just be honest about them, because everyone does have them. Everyone does have them. On my CV in particular, and I'm actually on my LinkedIn profile, if you've seen it, I am very open about my gaps. I think I've even put down why I've even left some of my jobs as well. I don't have anything to hide. And that's what comes down to it is that, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got no reason to be clear and to be transparent about those gaps. But yeah, certainly is to simply think about those gaps and what you learn in those gaps. So for me, the bereavement, what I learned from that, when I got COVID, what I learned from that, I just struggle with my own mortality. Um, you know, Thinking about my own mental health challenges and how that was the awakening to my neurodivergency, me taking the time to leave my last job to actually pursue and to tackle and have that confidence to actually tackle my own neurodivergent challenges and to say, you know what, I'm going to get this under the reins, because this is not going to be something that's going to be a challenge that's going to always define me. I'm going to be the one that sort of, leads this. So that would be the big thing I would say, Vina, is to look at what your gaps are and reframe them in a positive way. Because even with the most, most dark times that we have in our life, we learn something. We live and learn.
Yeah.
Whether it may
We live
be
and learn.
as dark as, I was caring for a person who was gravely ill and unfortunately they passed away. What does that show you? It shows you your compassion, it shows your kindness, your empathy, your ability to organize, your ability to prioritize. All of the little skills that they ask for, they're all in there. And
Life
I think,
skills.
yeah, and I would just say, really, I think my message, I think, to anyone in the recruitment space, within the HR space, is don't write people off when you don't see a gap. There's always a reason. There's always a reason.
Wow. What a closing line. Don't write people off when you see a gap. But generally speaking, no matter what, don't write people off.
Yeah.
Incredibly enlightening. You really shone a light of hope, a light of self awareness and respect of oneself and of others. And really, you've given some extremely valuable practical tips. Honestly, Nisar, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck, really, with the new role and life in general. And shout out, if I did actually copy that name correctly as you were speaking, Hates SDA support, in this community and any community. We need to continue lifting each other up through the communities, one person at a time. And yeah, do not write people off. Gorgeous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, Vina. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.